You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. Man, we are here once again, and then we have another awesome show for y'all today. We will have our guest join us, Joe Rockey. He is a business creator, and he also is someone who's doing great things in his community. He also has an awesome podcast show that we want to dive into a little bit today. The name of that show is Father and Joe. And man, you're not just a successful real estate career professional, if I can say it that way. Mm-hmm. I want to say thanks for coming on the show today, Joe. How you doing, man?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm doing very well.
Man, so before we talk about your podcast show and all that good stuff, give the audience a little bit of background with your real estate career. How did you get started, and what's some of the things you can share with us?
Yeah, so I actually came out of college in the last recession, and I was a very skill-based person. I realized that's what I needed as a degree to get paid. So I had accounting and finance, and every job I had since I was 18 was commission-based sales. So when the semester was going on of figuring out where you were going to go, I ended up declining some really good accounting gigs that later dried up anyway because they got removed because they had to fire people who were 30 years experience. They weren't going to bring on some new kid. But nonetheless, anyone that was hiring was sales positions. So I became what was called a financial advisor. Really, I was a life insurance salesman. And I sold life insurance and annuities for 3 years. I was very good at rookie of the year, first year, underclassman, second year, third year I left. And I left to go create my real estate businesses. And part of the reason I left was because I wanted to be able to control my own product. I wanted residuals. And the way that it was with these life insurance and annuities is I became very disheartened when the payout structure did not match what I promised it was going to be, nor did the products become the same. And I had a very big problem knowing that if I met you today, I wasn't able to sell you something as good as if I would have met you 2 months ago. So at the end of the day, I just wasn't going to be able to change the company. I just left it. So that's why I left to go create my own entities here. Again, focusing on residual income is what I wanted. So we went towards making a real estate background out of rentals, because at the time, that was really the only way you could get residual income. It's not like today where you can buy subscription-based products online or Netflix or anything like that. Basically, in the the aughts, the beginning of the tens, I guess, whatever it was, 2011 is when I started. So the only thing you could get for residual income at that point would have been your utilities and your rents. Pretty much everything else you paid instantly, and I wasn't going to be able to create a utility company. So this was kind of the only option, and that's what drove me into it. And my first flip was in a complete disaster. There's no way around that. And the second flip, I'm really glad that I had bought it before I finished the first one, because I don't know if I would be here had I not started that. The second flip more than made up for the shortcomings of the first one. And it's really been a learning experience and building upon relationships ever since.
So, man, when you left your day job to go create your first real estate business back in 2011, mm-hmm. I mean, what was the challenges? Was this something that you've been doing your homework on, so you prep yourself for a while before you jumped, or was this something that you just jumped and went all in and learned as you go?
Definitely number two. Homework and me were never actually a strong suit, to say the least. But yeah, I paired up with some guys who had already done it, and I found them as partners to teach me essentially what I needed to do and what not. So that was the ultimate plan. There was get some people who know what they're doing, kind of learn the ropes from them. We did three or four flips with them. I can't remember which one it was, but that's what I did. And then after there, it was just going out, certainly learning the hard way with some particular items, but mostly just learning from their knowledge, connecting with how they ran their business. How did they do inventory in terms of materials? How did they run their crews? Stuff like that. And then once I had learned the skills, I then went and created my own network of contractors, essentially.
Man, that's awesome. I mean, you just inspired so many people saying that, that you learned as you went, because there's so many tips out there and advice out there. But since we have you on this show, if someone was thinking about, man, real estate is something that I actually would be interested in doing one day, based on your own experience, what is some good ideas to have in mind before they make that jump to go ahead and do it?
So there's a number of things I can answer that with. One of which is, whenever you do make the jump, make sure you're doing it with someone who's already been through it. It's kind of like, if you know these waters, you can navigate them, but looking at them from a distance and trying to navigate them in your head does not end up being nearly what it is in reality when you're there. So there's all kinds of great literature out there. I'm not trying to discount that, but it is nothing compared to what it is when you're in the heat of a moment. And real estate gives you a lot of different angles of having potential things go wrong. That list is way too big to articulate the things that could go wrong. So my first answer is this, is partner up with someone who actually knows what they're doing. Or option two, be in a state in your life where you can go all in and have enough time left in your life to, if you fail, you can recover. Because there is a lot of people who have lost everything with bad decisions in real estate. It is incredibly common, actually. Most people don't talk about it, but it's a thing. And it is also incredibly lucrative if you do it correctly. So it's worth it on both sides. But that's why I would say is, if you've never been a manager, if you never knew how to run an operation, it can become very daunting, because when you're doing it correctly, you're running an 8-figure business immediately. And for most people who've never started anything, they just think, oh, I'll do a couple rentals. That's how you have to view it. Because if you do just a few flips a year, your revenue will be over $10 million. And to run a business like that takes a lot of either experience or a lot of ability to risk things that most people aren't willing to risk. And on top of that, you have to be completely comfortable living a commission lifestyle. And that's true whether you want to do flips or be a landlord, because there's no guarantee that check's coming. But the rest of your life's expenses still come every month. Like, you still have to pay your own gas bill and water bill, even if the tenant isn't paying you. And you have to be able to learn and navigate that system. So there's a lot of skills that are required. Like I said, I would partner up with someone, and I would also make sure that I'm the personality that's comfortable living a commission-based lifestyle.
Man, that's some good talk right there. And someone who, like yourself, I'm just hearing this conversation. You're someone that seems to be comfortable taking risk. And were you always that way, or was that something that you had to learn real fast?
Well, inevitably, when you're commission only, you are always taking a risk, right? Like, did I back the right company to sell this product? And for the first time, like I said, I started my first commission only sales job when I was 18. I was one of these guys who sold the knives, Cutco cutlery, and like, hey, I'm a college kid. Can I show up to your house with these really sharp knives? I promise nothing will go bad. Great sales pitch. So the long story short is I became comfortable with it because I chose to. I liked the notion of making 4 times as much as those around me, even if I only got paid 3 times a year. And it's a very feast or famine lifestyle. But if you can learn how to do it and how to be disciplined with yourself, that's really what's essential. And that's essential for any business, because you never know when the big rush of sales is going to come in. It's always variable in that regards. So that would be something that's true for any business, whether it be real estate or not, is the risk comes from knowing it might not work if I don't make it work. And the gray zone with this is the people who put one foot in the door and one not. And I see this a lot where someone has a good lucrative career, maybe they're a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, and they just want to try to buy a rental and then they'll see how it goes. And the problem with that is that if you're not all the way in, or you're not with a partner who's also an equity partner who's all the way in, a lot of things can easily fall through the cracks that before you even know it, you've fallen behind and are probably in an unsurmountable hole. It can really turn quickly unless you're on top of your day-to-day life as running this gig.
That makes sense. Once again, listen to I Am Refocused Radio, talking to our guest, Joe Rockey. And man, glad I asked you some questions about real estate, because I think a lot of people are always searching for opportunities. So I think that was great words of wisdom you share with us. I want to get into the podcast that you do as well. You have a podcast, be anywhere. You can hear it anywhere that you can find podcasts. Tell us about the show, Father and Joe, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so Father and Joe is, obviously I'm a co-host of it. I'm the Joe of the Father and Joe, and the father is Father Boniface Hicks. And what we do is we have conversations essentially about relationships, and we look at them through three different prisms. First being the relationship that you have with yourself, second being the relationship that you have with God, and third being your relationship you have with others. And I know immediately from having that sentence being said out of my mouth enough times that a number of people in the audience just had this queasy feeling inside of them when they heard relationship with themselves or relationship with God. Because most people have done something in their past that they're not exactly proud of, and they don't want it ever to come out of them, let alone talk about it openly. And what we really focus on is how to have that positive relationship. Don't ignore the bad thing that happened, but how to kindly address yourself in a loving fashion and how to grow. And from that stems a whole bunch of other variety of topics, but that's essentially the core of each episode. And what got it started was, for those that remember 2017, for some people it was way long ago and we don't remember it, but in 2017, this country was articulated by the powers that be on the internet and on the cable shows that the world was falling apart, and the transition from Trump to Obama, or from Obama to Trump rather, was a disaster. And you weren't allowed to talk to people who watched Fox if you were a CNN person, or vice versa. And it was all articulated that you don't talk to the other side, you treat them as caricatures, and we don't have any engagement. And as a fact of human history, anytime a culture or society has taken that attitude to the furthest extreme, which has happened a lot, unfortunately, there's only one of three outcomes. Either A, that country goes to war with someone else, B, that country has a civil war, or C, that country commits a genocide on itself, which is really just a one-sided civil war. So, not liking any of those options, I'd rather go out and try to accomplish something. And that's when I reached out to Father. And that was how the podcast really was born, was having conversations like that. And we've ranged from everything from, like I said, those feelings that are deep down inside us, to how are we supposed to feel about the fact that Putin over in Russia just started a war? You know, at the end of the day, the entire conversation is about life and building other people up. But this guy just started killing people because he felt like it. If someone would take him out, this would be over. At least that's my thought process. So I talked to Father about that, and we have a real in-depth conversation, because on the one hand, we're trying to save innocence, but on the other hand, we're actively rooting for assassination. So how do we, as individuals trying to promote the best good in life, balance that question? And the answer is not rooting for an assassination, by the way. You can go through all these types of questions and episodes we've had Like I said, we've been doing this for 5 years. We've discussed a whole lot of topics.
Man, that's awesome. So once again, listen, I'm Refocus Radio talking to Joey Rockey. So man, from real estate to, having a successful start with your early career before you became your own boss, your own entrepreneur, to faith, and talking about the podcast that we just mentioned moments ago, Father and Joe, and how that show kind of anchors into really just creating a stronger bond with God. Now, when it comes to faith, how has that made influence in you? How has that influence of faith impacted your life?
In a lot of ways. And I think that where people can kind of get thrown off in those types of questions is nothing immediately comes to your surface. Like when you're thinking about, I don't know, maybe. But the reality is that when you actually dive into it, to have success in this life, and this doesn't really matter which element you're in, what environment you're in, your age, your employment, your industry, none of that matters. This is universal to mankind. There are the 4 main things that will make you better at anything. If you just got better at these 4 things, your life would be so much better. Being prudence, justice, temperance, and courage. And what they are, and I'll try to take the church terms out of it. Prudence basically is making your mind better about what you're trying to discuss, becoming more intelligent, more articulate about what you're trying to talk about. So obviously, whatever industry you're in, whatever you're trying to sell, knowing your product, knowing your company, knowing what you're capable of, knowing what your family is capable of, that's all thinking about things. Temperance is knowing your place in the world at the end of the day. That's what humility falls into. Not making yourself bigger than anyone, nor making yourself diminished and smaller than you really are, but knowing your place appropriately. And then justice being treating people in accordance to their actions. Not what they say they're going to do one day, not what they think they deserve, but actually based upon what their actions are. And then courage is when something comes inside of you, figuring out a way to get it out in a coherent fashion, figuring out how to say what you're trying to say. And the reality is that when you look at those 4 things cumulatively, they're applicable to every element of my business. When it comes time to figure out who gets bonuses and who gets fired, it's strictly an element of justice. I don't care what you look like or how long you've worked for me. I care what is the quality of your work, period. When it comes time to figuring out when we should evict someone or not, we go off of the facts of, I'm not more important than you because I own the house. We are equals in a relationship that we had in an agreement. You broke yours. That doesn't make me a bad person. That makes me just doing as the contract says. You chose not to pay. You don't get to live there anymore. So that's how temperance applies. And obviously, prudence, constantly thinking about things and how to articulate them, encourages getting it out of my mouth. So you can see how that's applicable to my industry, obviously, but it's applicable to anyone, anywhere in their stage of life, from the point of learning how to talk all the way until, late age situations.
And when people are navigating through life, and they say life just happens sometimes, and you just have to adjust how you react versus just being too emotional about it. But guess what? We're all emotional. Like, you can throw that out the window. It's always going to happen. But I say that because you are someone who is successful in your career. And when I say success, I'm just saying success based on the fact that you have drive. It's obvious you have drive. You are contributing to this show to lay out a blueprint how someone else who is listening to your voice can apply what you are sharing to their own personal life. So that way they can grow and become successful. When we say success on this show, we're not necessarily talking about you becoming the billionaire or whatever. We're really talking about you just simply adding value in your life. How can you be happier, find purpose, find peace with the fact that you are pushing yourself. And I'm saying all that to say, you've been able to do that. You've been able to have a platform where you get to share your story and get to inspire people with your history. Why is it so important for people to search for their purpose and find meaning in life? Why is it so important for them to do that?
Well, we're all called to do that. At the end of the day, we're called to make the world a better place than how we found it. And that's going to be a little bit different to each person in the way that we view that. But to give someone a concrete thing that we can apply to our lives, whether it be changing Congress or changing our bed, this is something that in the macro sense of life will change everything. See, there's this idea that's told to people that you can compartmentalize your life. You can be this way as a father. You can be this way as an employee. You can be this way as a driver down the freeway. But the reality is that in the long run, you become the same person. So if you're always the guy who's driving down, cutting people off and swearing at people continuously, that is not able to be isolated in one component of your life. It eventually will roll over in being that kind of father, that kind of employee. So I bring this up to say that all of us have some relationship that we have in our lives that we wish was better. Maybe it's gone cold. Maybe it had a violent ending. But what I would say to anyone out there listening that wants to help have more personal peace within themselves and therefore spreading it to those around them, whoever that person is that you wish you had a better relationship with, type those 10 numbers in your phone and press that little green button to call them. Don't send a tweet. Don't send a text. Actually call them. And the amazing thing is that it might not be the outcome you want on this conversation. I could upfront tell you that. But just addressing it will unlock so much weight that you didn't know you were bogging down, and it will bring peace to you, especially if you move towards a peaceful resolution. And on that note, to those who have dealt with a violent explosion ending of a relationship, the way that the human mind works, the further it is in the past, the less accurate you probably are. Because our mind inherently builds us to make us feel that we did the right thing. The reality is the other person's mind is probably incorrect as well. And this is something to think about when you look at it as like, I don't want to talk to them because they did this bad thing to me. They probably think that they're the good guy in that story in their head. And that's just the way it is. So I bring that up as something we all can do moving forward in our lives. We can do it this evening. We can call someone we wish we had a better relationship. They might be in the same houses. We might just go over and have a conversation with them. But it's something that will make yourself so much better in every other facet of your life because you haven't realized that you've put this negative thing in a compartment in the back of your mind. And get rid of it will truly enhance yourself. It will give you better peace. And just you having more peace will be an example to those around you and therefore a multiplier effect to the rest of society at large.
And that last part was good stuff right there. That's what they call the secret sauce right there. That was good, man. Once again, listen to Unfocused Radio, talking to our guest today, Joe Rockey. And man, you listen to this, man, you might want to listen to this episode twice and share with your friends because Joe's been saying some great things. Before we let you go, people can find you online, LinkedIn, Twitter. You have your podcast show on Twitter, Father and Joe on Twitter. What's the best way someone listening to this right now to connect with you and maybe just talk, or if you offer any resources, services, how can they do that?
Yeah, so the best way to find us, like I said, we're on every single platform, is Father and Joe. 3 words, Father and Joe. Within every single description of every single episode, I break down exactly that question. So rather than reading out 20 emails to you, depending upon what you're trying to accomplish, I would just invite people to do that. Go to listen to an episode, Father and Joe, and then in the description of any one of those episodes, you'll be able to contact us in the appropriate channel based upon your needs.
Well, man, once again, been honored talking to our guest, Joe Rockey, business creator who made countless opportunities happen and helping people like you and myself. And man, check out that podcast that he does, Father and Joe. You can find it on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you can hear a podcast. I want to say thank you again for taking time in your schedule, man, talking to I Am Refocused Radio.
Well, thank you for having me. Yes.